Well, welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Comic Watcher Show, number 107
Yes.
by my count. Holy smoke, I don't know what we're thinking with this many episodes under our belt. I'm your host, Mighty Matt, and with me is Chain Smoking Chad. He used to be churlish, but now I'm coming up to other things. With us this week, we have author Daniel Kraus. He is, on top of being a very proficient novelist in his own right, he is currently got a new project from AWA called TROJAN that is launching. Daniel, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, my friend. So you are a very accomplished novelist. You've worked with Guillermo del Toro. You were a finalist for the Bram Stoker Award. Lots of horror under your belt, and maybe not exclusively, but at the same time, I'd say it's fair to say you're a horror guy. You kind of started dipping your toes into comics recently with AWA's Year Zero, Volume 3, and now we're looking at TROJAN, mini series of yours with art by Lacey and Marco Lesko. So tell us a little bit about TROJAN.
Well, it looks like this. This is what the first issue looks like, anyway.
I like that. I like that cover art a lot, by the way. I'm a big graphic design type guy, and so when stuff like that just very well balanced art catches me. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, it's. I mean, as you said, I'm relatively new. My first comic was the autumnal with Vault, and that was in 2020. And then I've got these two with AWA this year. So yeah, TROJAN came up through a sort of shared fascination that I had with Axel Alonso from AWA. We were talking on the phone once, and we found out that we both had always wanted to do something about snuff films. We were both interested in the phenomena of snuff films sort of throughout history. And I had been sort of trying to crack a novel about it for like a decade or so. And so when he said he was running through sort of ideas for comics that he hadn't really done yet, he said something about snuff films, and I said, well, that's funny. I've been kind of working on an idea like that for a long time, and I never had been able to figure it out. But all my ideas had been really dramas. Really, they took place in just the regular real world. And for some reason, as soon as I thought of it as a comic instead of a novel, which allowed my brain to bring in fantastical elements to it, suddenly it all clicked into place. And what I had been thinking about for 10 years, I figured out in 10 minutes, which is usually how it goes. But yeah, so this is a world that is sort of an alternate present, I guess, in which there are mythological creatures that have lived among us for a long time. All your standard fairies, centaurs, anything, and they're sort of known as legends. And then at some point, society sort of turned on them because they were pure and good enough that they made us sort of feel bad about ourselves. And we sort of shunned them, and now they kind of live at the fringes, kind of like homeless people. And this book is about one of them, a fairy, who sort of blackmails a dark web, a dark net navigator into introducing her to this guy who on the dark net does these snuff shows. So the rich and twisted of the world can log in and pay big money and watch him or watch his people kill mythological creatures on camera live, which is a very upsetting and bleak idea. And therefore, I think it really appealed to me, the idea of like not just a snuff film, but purposely killing these creatures that were extremely beautiful and rare. Like, you always hear about those, and that movie The Fresh was sort of about this, how there are these clandestine clubs for the uber rich where they eat like the last examples of an endangered species or something. Um, so that sort of terrible idea is kind of what's behind this too. Like, what would drive someone or society to create someone who would want to do this just over the top terrible thing? And Nessa, the girl, what she says is that she has a very sick mother, and that she knows that the payout for appearing in this snuff film will be enough to save her mother. So she is arranging it so because she knows a fairy will go for a high price, and so she's sacrificing herself for the payout, which will then, or at least that's what she says she's doing. Things get sort of more complicated as the series goes.
So, that's a lot. That's a lot of heavy, weighty stuff. And this is a 4-issue miniseries, and that's a lot of disparate, just plot elements, and you have to build the world as well, and give the characters room to breathe and readers to care about them. How in the world are you going to pull all that off in 4 issues?
Well, I mean, because I'm a novelist, I do comics like a novelist does, which is I write all of them up front. So I'm not writing issue to issue. I upload everything at once.
No.
So I can say I've already done it. Say,
right. Okay.
How am I going to do it? I've done it. I do hope to at some point experiment with doing it in this other way, which to me is sort of what I understand as kind of the traditional way to write comics, which is issue to issue, which to me just seems like madness. I don't know. I can't imagine writing, not knowing, when I'm writing, like when I did Autumnal, which was an 8-issue comic, when I was writing issue 8, I was still doing things that were making me revise things in issue 1. So it boggles my mind but I know it's sort of a control thing, and you write yourself in the corners and have to be creative to work yourself out of them. So I sort of get it, and I want to try it. But yeah, the good news is for this one, it was just 4 issues, so it was even easier to sort of do them all up front. And so you can work on balance stuff like that, and you can look at the whole run and really balance it and move stuff that was in issue 1 to issue 3, and really sort of make sure that everything has the right weight and pacing.
Okay. Chad, why don't you jump on in, man?
Seeing how you're pretty new to comic books, what is your history with comic books? Because as a writer, I'm sure that, and you just said that you write the whole thing at once. Did you going into writing comic books, your first one, did you have some background previously, like growing up or anything with comic books that kind of helped you with pacing and stuff like that?
Well, audience, hold on to your butts, because I had zero experience in comics. I grew up without comics. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, and I always sort of in this, when it comes to this question, I always compare it to like the town in Footloose where there was no dancing. It's like I don't think there were comics in my town. Like I think of this small town, and I think of the place where where they had paperback books and stuff, and I just don't remember I don't remember having friends who had comics. Like it was this comics black hole. So I didn't grow up with comics at all. I don't have any of the nostalgia built in that a lot of my contemporaries have. I don't have any of the background of DC and Marvel knowledge. I don't have anything. I had exactly 3 comic books growing up, and that my mom at some point went, again, this was a small town, so she went to some other bigger town at some point, and they must have been packaged in a little bag or something at the checkout counter, but she bought me this little 3-pack of comics, and they were the last 3 issues of Secret Wars. And so the only comic books I had any experience with were the last 3 issues of Secret Wars, which I read and was so fascinated by, partly because I had no idea what was going on. And there's there was something really intriguing about that. I was dropped into issue, what would that be? 10, 11, 12, I think. And never had any clue what was going on, who these people were, what situation they were in. It was just bizarre and cosmic. And I read those 3 issues again and again. And only a few years ago did I finally go back and read the entire Secret Wars, which was great. So that was it. That until relatively recent. I mean, in the past 10 years or so, I've read graphic novels mostly and stuff like that. But still, until really recently, my comics knowledge and experience was close to nothing. Autumnal, I was jumping in, with very little background, and for whatever reason, I took to it right away. And we can talk about that. I mean, I really have had just an absolute blast working on them.
Well, it's a different kind of writing. Like, based on what you're saying, it doesn't, you're not writing comic scripts in the quote unquote traditional way, but we've had other writers on here that describe it very similarly to basically directing a movie.
Yeah.
Except you're writing everything out instead of being the director and saying words and looking in a camera.
It's it's very similar to screenwriting.
Yeah. How have you, as somebody that's obviously quite comfortable in the world of writing prose, how do you feel in your adaptation of your own style and your own writing tics, so to speak, when it comes to comics?
That's interesting to think of it in terms of tics, which is fair. I mean, I think it's a good way to look at it. I'm in writing, and for me, that's these days 75% novels still. I'm still, my main thrust in my career has always been to try to shock myself awake. Like I don't want to ever fall into a rut or a pattern of doing the same kind of book over and over again. And so I've made it an art, hopefully, of creating new problems for myself. That's what it's all about, is creating limitations, new hurdles, new things that make me have to find out new ways and new ways of working, create new solutions. One way I've done that is working with collaborators, because when you collaborate on something, that intrinsically is going to bring in problems and friction, and that's one way of having to make yourself work in a new kind of way. And another way is to completely change formats, which is what comics has done. Is right. Okay, so I'm gonna have to write in a brand new way that engages a whole different part of my brain, which is, it's like screenwriting, but it also has an element of Tetris in it, where you're having to put the panels together in a certain formulation so the page turn works and the spreads work, and the units of information all sort of locked together in a visual top to bottom way, and that creates new problems and interesting new solutions you have to come up with that are newly structural. Like, it seems obvious to longtime comic readers and creators, but for someone who's based in novels, the idea that you have something and you have a finite number of pages, you only get 22 pages, let's say, and you have to do an arc within those pages, and you have to have this much of you can only have so many panels on a page, and you have to you want to use the page turn to it.
You can't put too many words in a panel. You have to leave room for the art.
Oh, I learned a lot of lessons. My favorite lesson was on my very first script I turned in. There was I wrote something like, 50 people are watching in the background, and the editor was like, to not freak out your artist, let's say there's a suggestion of a crowd. I was like, okay, I get it.
The artist goes, ha ha.
Yeah, so that was a good reminder that. Now I always apologize when I'm writing something that I know is going to be difficult to draw. But yeah, to answer your question, like, it's a good, not antidote to tics that I have, because tics are generally things I want to try to get away from. but it isn't a total antidote, but it is a way around them and a way to think about them differently, and a way to just sort of do stuff that I normally wouldn't do. Like in Autumnal, I went ahead and let myself. There's something about the format that made me want to almost made me want to be a slightly more accessible than I am in novels, where I can sort of outthink myself a little bit and be a little obtuse sometimes, where there was something about the comic format that, and maybe it's the similarity to screenwriting, because you sort of have this by necessity of needing more audience, more eyes in movies. It made me want to reach for moments that were not crowd pleasing exactly, but like bigger, something that more people could wrap their arms around in a way. So it's interesting with different formats will sort of kick out of my head.
Well, and I like the way that you kind of point that out, because I immediately thought of the scene in the first issue with the homeless man who turns out to be Faye, and the big scene that the big thing that befalls him during that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really striking set piece that sets the tone for this world, even though we don't really know this world yet. Like we're starting to get an idea pretty damn quick as to what's going on, especially the various other characters' reaction to it. So if that was your intent, I dare say you succeeded. So
yeah.
Chad, go ahead and jump back on in, buddy.
Yeah. So, obviously the tone of the book or the setting is very dark. Did you have what kind of, I don't know, I don't say research, but did you do any like research for, I'm not saying you went on the dark web, but
yeah, right. Well, typically I do a ton of research. Right over here where I'm looking is sort of my shelves of research. So, it's very typical for a book. If I'm writing a novel, that I'll have anywhere between 10 and 100 research texts I'm drawing from. I go nuts with research. This was probably the lightest research I've ever had to do for maybe any project ever. And really, you nailed it. Really, the only thing I had to do was I read a couple books on the dark web. You can see some of that in issue 1. There'll be more later in the subsequent issues, where I really sort of get into, and not in a way that's dull. You can let it wash right over you if you want to reading it, but sort of the details of how the dark web exists and how you access it and what's possible there. And the books I read, which I don't think I have up here or I named them, were terrifying. I mean, it really is, and everything this book says it is. You can really get almost anything there. I can't think of anything offhand you can't. I mean, in theory, technically, you can't get snuff there, but it seems highly unlikely to me that, I mean, this goes back to the old conversation, does snuff exist? And the old official answer was always, and to this day, is no, but I don't believe it.
No, I think there's enough people out there that would very much enjoy seeing snuff, a snuff film enacted for that to not be real.
There's no way. I mean, back in the age, I'm thinking about like back when Rotten.com was popular and stuff.
Yes.
It seems to me that given how much of a cultural phenomena that was, and kind of all the things that led from that, it seems impossible that this wasn't going on, particularly in the early internet when there wasn't regulatory commissions and watchdog groups. And I'm sure we all remember early internet days where like you didn't know what you were going to come across at any moment anywhere, because there just wasn't enough infrastructure yet.
Right. I mean, it really was the wild, wild west out there, which is really what I mean. The dark web is kind of harkening back to in its own kind of twisted way.
Yeah, right.
Is just that freedom to find whatever the hell you want. Which leads us to our other protagonist, Dirk Overhaul, our dark web navigator. So he's an interesting cat. Doesn't seem to want to get involved with a lot of things. He's obviously probably broken a few laws like every day.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about Dirk and how he gets sucked into
and a
all of
classic
it.
gamer.
Yeah.
And he's a classic gamer. I
Right.
loved that.
He has an
Yes.
NES, right. Yeah, I wanted, you really have sort of the two main characters, and eventually there'll be kind of a third main character. But really at the beginning we have Nessa, who again, there's a lot of twists coming. So at least in the first issue, is a sort of a pure kind of innocent fairy who's doing something. She's sacrificing herself for something good. And so she, in the very first scene, she's walking sort of dangerously into this really dangerous neighborhood, and right in front of her sees an assault, and then ends up, sort of blackmailing this dark web navigator. And so he's someone who, who's sort of your chauffeur into whatever you need to find on the dark net. He can help you find it for a fee.
Hell of a way to make a living.
Yeah. Typically, though, he doesn't do this in person. I mean, why would he? He's an anonymous. He's behind many layers of anonymity. This time, he's accosted by someone in real life who then forces him to take her into his apartment, which is a space that he was never expecting anyone to go in, and because of that, it reveals all of his humanity and insecurities. He's got the Nintendo system, and he's got his Lucky Charms cereal, and he's got this cute little ferret pet, and so all these, online he's probably this personality who's impenetrable, but in person he's got all these vulnerabilities, and
right, he's just a guy.
It's a canny way. It was probably smart of her to approach him that way. So he's kind of off. He's off his step. He's
right.
She's got him uncomfortably. So yeah, she's in his apartment, and he's like, "All right, well, we're gonna do this. Let's do it." And he starts showing her what's there, and she tells him what he wants, and which is to introduce her to this guy known as Capo, who he doesn't even want to. He really does not want to find, because this guy's one of the worst of the worst. But I really like him. There's really nothing likable. There should be nothing likable about him.
Right.
He's a messed up guy. He's an addict himself. He's living in semi-squalor. So he's got nowhere to go but up, really. And so that's a fun place for me to write a character where he's going to have to pull himself a little bit out of the grime to successfully interact with a real human being for once, instead of just ones and zeros behind the screen.
Right.
It's easy to do terrible things through a computer. We are not dealing with flesh and blood. You're just dealing with a name. It's very easy to deal up whatever this person says. I want, to see this or this, or hire this person to do this terrible thing. It's easy when you don't know their name, you don't know their face.
Sure.
This makes them have to sort of be a human being.
Chad?
I was just thinking when you were talking about him, I was just thinking I learned, I guess I know the secret now behind the choose the picture with the the stairs or something in it after reading.
Is that an issue one? I couldn't remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like some of that stuff is so what he's talking about are is it CAPTCHA, or is that just it's like when you have
CAPTCHA, I think it is.
When you have the 9 boxes, and they're like, click all the boxes with traffic lights. So what this posits is that one of the ways you get to these secret sites is you pretend that the capture boxes are a dial, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You know the code and you flick them. And although that's not exactly accurate to what I read in the books, there are things much like very close to that. The thing that's right above that on the same page is real, which is some sites require you, the sort of password to get into them is to visit random other sites in a particular order before you go to the site. And that's the unlocking.
How much of that is based on your own research, or were you just like very fertile with your imagination there?
No, that's real. That's
yeah, I mean, I genuinely thought, wow, that's actually really smart.
Yeah, that's real.
That's pretty cool, actually. So
yeah,
we've got
it's really interesting how they hide stuff.
So we've got the tech side, we've got the highly disturbing snuff side, and we have the fairies and mythical creatures. I assume mythical creatures. So far we've only seen fairies. Are there elves and
yes,
whatever else running them up? Okay. So
we also saw the homeless man. He had like a centaur or something.
That's true.
At the very beginning.
That's true.
And then there's a quick shot of a mermaid that's been chopped up.
Yeah, that's
yes, the sushi.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to let your own dark imagination run a little bit wild here. How much did you lean into your own horror background in informing this story?
I mean, going really dark is generally what I do. This definitely is on the darkest end, though. Like, I've maybe written 20 books, something around that, and this I think is in the top 2 or 3 that feel dark in a different way. That's that trouble me a little bit. Like, and I always figured when I wrote this, whatever the snuff idea that I wanted to get out was, that it would be one of those ideas, and it's true. There's something about the idea that's just particularly nasty and lingers with you in a way, and definitely lingers with me in a way that I think by the end of the series, by the end of issue 4, there's something that I think there's a catharsis that kind of breaks, and there's a nicer feeling that sort of erupts, I think, at the end of this. But it is, I'm not gonna,
Sure, yeah, we don't want you to ruin your own comic.
It's
go buy it.
Oh no, but I mean, like, I won't kid you though that it is a tough comic. Like, it is very mature, and it's one of the few things that I've done that even bothers me a little bit. It's an ugly thing to think about.
Sure,
but it's drawn beautifully, and that's one of the things that I love more than anything, and I've done consistently, or try to do consistently in all my book, is to write beautifully about horrible things, and in this case, have someone draw beautiful pictures to my terrible things.
So, how much contact did you have with Lacey? I mean, did you all actually engage, or at any creative level, or was there more just like a well, here's the script, go do your thing kind of a feel?
Yeah, I mean, in the brief time that I've been in comics, I've seen it a few different ways. There's been like heavy involvement from the get-go, and then there's been things that are a little more at a distance, and this was probably somewhere in the middle. We definitely all got together at the beginning and figured out what the character is going to look like. Because I'm handing in everything at once, you get the artist can read everything right away, so they can sort of get maybe a better sense of what the characters are than if you only have maybe one issue to base them on.
Sure.
So a lot of it was sort of physical things, like what do they, for Dirk, it was, I remember I went, I kind of went searching for like kind of what I thought he might look like. He was a little harder to figure out.
Kind of looks like Jeff Kober, the actor.
Jeff Kober. Yeah, I know who that is.
Oh, I guarantee you do.
Yeah.
He's one of those TV actors. He's been in just like everything.
Yeah.
Walking Dead, X-Files.
I just looked him up. Yeah.
Yeah, you know that guy.
Yes.
That's who I immediately thought of when I saw
Yeah, that's the person who I found. I don't remember who it was. He might have been an actor. It wasn't someone really well known. It wasn't Jeff Kober, but I can see the resemblance. Yeah. And then it was just a matter of, very sort of standard. He would send in the sketches, the pencils, and the inks, and it was. I mean, I am a huge fan of Lacey. Like I am just stunned by the stuff he did in this book.
It's really cool art. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Tim Truman. Not Tim Truman, Tim Bradstreet. But it's very, very similar. And Tim Bradstreet's one of the guys out there. So
I'm not, but that doesn't surprise me.
You've got your homework then. But yeah, Lacey's art really reminds me of Bradstreet.
Yeah, his back, the detail that's in his like backgrounds is just gobsmacking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're now, you're a few years into your comics career, which is still in the minority compared to prose. But I mean, are you feeling more comfortable in general with the way it all works? Are you still find yourself learning new things? What's your ease with this so far?
Well, like I said, I took to it right away.
Okay.
It doesn't mean I don't have tons to learn, because I know I do, because every time because the last few years I've been trying to, I'll never catch up, but I've been doing what I can to read comics as much as I can, and it's like not having seen movies all your life or something. It's like, well,
sure,
everything's been done and so incredibly well. What could I possibly have to offer that has? So yeah, it's although I took to it right away, there's obviously so much more that can be done with it than I've only scratched the surface.
Sure, of course.
I just read the first volume of Absolute Swamp Thing, for example.
Oh.
And I mean, it made me feel lazy. Like I was like, oh, I could be working so much harder and in such and much and like I said, my instinct when I did Autumnal, maybe because it was my first one and I wanted to keep it relatively straightforward and simple.
Sure.
I went with something that I thought was if it were a screenplay, it would be something that I was that could open to a lot of people. Like it was something that I thought was a horror thing, but it wasn't really obscure. It wasn't Trojan, where it's going to challenge a lot of people's what they can take or not. It was something a little more easy for people to swallow, and that made sense at the time. I think Trojan sort of is the start of kind of me opening up a little bit, and in this sense, it's subject matter and going a little further down the rabbit hole with that. But I think there's a lot there's so much I'd like to do with format and wild ideas I have about how to use the page as a sort of container of images. And some of these ideas I'll run by my editors and say, has anyone ever done this before? And usually they'll say, yeah, there's like so-and-so. But every once in a while, I've had a couple ideas where like, yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that before. And probably because it's a terrible idea and won't work. But I am trying to think of, like, I'm a big fan of, and I've done this a little bit in novels, of like thinking about the page as a graphic thing. Like I read this book once several years ago that was from the point of view of somebody who was watching security cameras. He was a guard in a hotel, not a guard, but a security camera. And so the page would suddenly go to two columns when he was watching 2 cameras at once, or 3 columns, and he was keeping his eye on 3 cameras at once. And I thought that was really interesting how the page was used, diced up in a way to reflect what was happening. So I've been thinking about a lot of stuff like that as far as the comics, like how to, you obviously, when I'm coming up with an idea, I'm deciding, is this a screenplay? Is this a novel? Is this a comic? There are reasons you choose one or the other. And so I have been trying to think of things that could only work as comics because of certain graphical representations. And so I'm trying to come up with some original angles on that, but I have no idea if I'll succeed.
Have you thought about adapting any of your prose work into, the comic format?
I had a publisher ask me about that recently. I don't know. First of all, I'd have to check the rights of some of that. I mean, most of my books are with big publishers, so I'd have to see if that's even something I could legally do. Like I'd have to make sure that was a right that wasn't reserved by the public. I'm pretty sure I have that legal right. So, but the very fact that I can't answer it to you means no, I haven't done it yet. But yeah, there are 2 or 3 of my books that I think would be particularly good in the graphic novel space. It's just a matter of finding, a publisher who'd be interested in that, because they aren't, they wouldn't be original. They would be, associated intellectual property type. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what the demand for that would be.
Way to go, Chad! You stumped him.
Well, I'd love to find out.
Yeah, that's
Get an interview over.
Way to go, Chad. So, what is it about horror that you find appealing?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the question I get most of all. And I wonder if romance writers get that question all the time. What is about it that romance? I bet they do. I bet all genre writers get that question. For me, it goes way back. Like, I got into horror when I was 5 or 6 years old. I was watching Twilight Zone reruns with my mom, and got into Night of the Living Dead. I saw at that age, and just got obsessed with, and I'm still obsessed with it. So it's my theory is, the going theory is that my mom and I watched. I had a couple sisters, but really horror was just something my mom and I did together. And my guess is that although these things obviously scared me because I was little, her enjoyment of it, because she was enjoying it as an adult, made it a safe space. And so I think I attached kind of good feelings to horror. It was a special time. Like, whenever I didn't think about it like that then, but I can recognize now that it was a special thing that just the 2 of us did, and no one else in the house was interested in it. And as I got older, I had a evolving relationship with horror. I can remember periods where I couldn't watch it; it'd make me physically ill, and then I'd swing back and get really into it again. I've always been someone who has been really fascinated by my own reactions to things. I think it's a very sensible reaction to experience something, be scared of it, and to never return to it. That makes perfect sense. But my reaction has always been, if something scares me, to maybe run away, but then come back and try to figure out what was it that scared me. Can I deal with it now? This thing that scared me when I was 10 years old, now that I'm 13, can I take it? And that has sort of ratcheted up over the years. And I still have an eye out for, and I watch literally every genre and read every genre of stuff possible. But I always have an eye out for the extreme. Because to this day, when you're little, the extreme is just Nightmare on Elm Street or something. Or if you're a kid of the 80s, maybe Faces of Death if you want to get, super, super edgy. Um, but I'm still have a piece of me that is always sort of radaring for the obscure thing that only one person alive has ever seen, that's supposed to be just so upsetting that nobody can possibly watch it. And I'll try to find it. Like, I still have that sort of daring testing, like before Cannibal Holocaust, the infamous Cannibal Holocaust. Before that became sort of readily available, which it did in the last 10 years, and now everyone's seen it. But like, that was the one thing that I got on the early internet. I've never been someone who's understand how to, I don't know how to torrent things or whatever, but that was the one thing that I tried to like find on the early internet and found and watched. And yeah, I've still got that element of like daring myself to watch extreme stuff and to read extreme stuff. But that's just on the one hand. On the other hand, I'm watching Merchant Ivory films or whatever. It's like, I'm trying to mix it up.
So, how did you and AWA come to be partners? You mentioned talking with Axel Alonso on the phone.
Yeah.
But he's the guy over there. But how did that relationship spark up?
Sure. Yeah. So Benjamin Percy did Year Zero, 1 and 2, and was basically gonna, I think, stop doing them. He had had his fill, and Alex had read my book that I wrote with George Romero, The Living Dead, which had come out, or I think it came out 2020, so pretty recently. And that's a big, giant zombie novel, big, like, I don't know, 600, 700-page zombie novel. And he had read that and just loved it. So he just contacted me, kind of out of the blue, and said, "Look, would you be interested in doing a Year Zero, Volume 0?" So it sort of like goes before Ben's two runs. And I really didn't particularly have a lot of interest in it. Like, I had spent my life being sort of obsessed with George Romero, but then got to work on that book with him, and it was a dream come true and all that stuff. But I thought, I've done zombies. I'm not going back to them. But he sent me Year Zero, and I just loved it. I just really, really liked it. I thought what the template that Ben set up, which is just 4 stories, different parts of the world, intercut. They don't cross over. The characters don't meet. It was so simple and so appealing. And the one thing I didn't get to do in The Living Dead, that novel was by design, very America focused. And this was like, the one thing I didn't get to do was to deal with the zombie uprising in an international way. And so I just couldn't help it. I was like, yeah, I guess I'm in. And it just went really well. It was one of those projects, and I've only had a few of these in my life that just, I did the whole 5-issue run in like 10 days or something. Like, it just flew out of me. Now there was a lot of research involved with that. Like, I had to do a lot of research before I started writing on North Korea and the Russian police and all these kind of other things, how hospitals are run, various weird things. So there's probably weeks of research in there. But once I started writing, it just came fast. And usually when things come that fast, they're good. And I just came out of me that fast. I sent them all to Axel, and he read them all and just was like, "What else you got?" And then we started talking about Trojan.
I mean, you've worked with George Romero and Guillermo del Toro. Do you have any more up to go at this point in your career?
Well, particularly with Romero, because like,
sure,
he was really my hero, like, growing up, and his movies guided everything in my career. So that was a huge deal. Of course, I did a couple projects with Guillermo, and that was obviously amazing. Probably if there's a hero out there that I haven't worked with, it's probably Rod Serling. Like Romero and Serling were sort of my guiding lights as a young artist. So I haven't done anything that touches on the Twilight Zone or any that IP or anything like that. But that's sort of maybe the missing piece. So I should focus on that, I guess.
Yeah, get
Do
him.
you have a favorite Twilight Zone episode?
Oh, I have a ready answer for that. There's kind of two. There's the first episode I ever saw was The Invaders, which is a classic episode for you Twilight Zone fans. It's the one with the old woman who lives alone in this little cabin, and the little tiny spacemen come in and start invading her little cabin. And that's the very first episode I saw with my mom when I was 5 years old or whatever. And it was so startling because you just not only does a kid not normally see scary black and white television at that age, but there was no dialogue. Like it's you just don't. Kids' entertainment is constantly screaming, and there's no dialogue in this episode. It's so chilling. But my sort of underdog favorite is an episode that isn't particularly well known. It's called Night Call, about this old woman who's old. She's dying. She's kind of old, and she lost her husband a long time ago. And she starts getting these phone calls at night. Her phone rings, and she picks it up, and there's just this voice, and it goes, like that. And it's so fucking terrifying. Like this episode chills me to the bone, like very few things do. It's the scariest Twilight Zone episode to me. I could talk endlessly about Twilight Zone.
What about modern horror? Like we've seen a pretty good renaissance in horror in the last probably 7, 8, 9 years. What are your picks out of more modern horror films?
Yeah, it's been a good 5 or 10 years. It's been, for people who, and I've been publishing since maybe like 2009 or something, but people I know who've been in the business quite a bit longer, sort of back up your sentiment that this is one of those rare times we haven't seen since the 80s where horror has really become a popular genre to be in. In other decades, it's sort of the bastard child. I mean, there's so many people I could mention. It's hard. I don't. Should I choose a medium? I mean, I'll just randomly for books,
Yeah, books, film, TV, whatever floats your boat, man.
Maybe we'll skip around. So for books, there's always like people who are going to be the next Stephen King or whatever. But really, if the person I think who's out there who's delivering books pretty much annually that feel like King in his prime is this guy Adam Neville. He's a British writer, and I just read everything he writes, and they're just page turners. They're just really fun to read. My favorite sort of lesser known writer right now is Maurice Meyer, Meijer, who you probably have never heard of, anyone listening, but has a novel and a couple of books of short stories out, and I think she's really amazing and exciting, and is going to be huge at some point. Movies, I mean, geez, I will maybe just, instead of filmmakers, talk about films. I think my favorite film last year was actually not that obscure. It was Men by Alex Garland. Really
cool.
Yeah. Really, and I've liked all of his movies, but Men especially just blew my mind. What an incredible movie. What weird choices it makes, and nothing will get me to watch a movie or read a book more than someone saying it has an incredible ending. Like that I'm a sucker for that. And Men has just the greatest ending I've seen in a while. So seek out that.
Chad?
Now that you've kind of dipped your toe into the comics world, are there characters in either the major universes that you would like to take a stab at playing in that sandbox?
Well, I think I can talk about this, but I was signed up for. I'm just going to talk about it. I'm sure it's fine. I was signed up to do a book for DC, and then during one of their sort of restructurings, however you want to call it, where people got laid off, and
They have those?
yeah, a bunch of books got canceled, and one of those. And mine was one of them, and it was a Catwoman thing. Again, I don't have a real none of the characters. I don't have a nostalgic identification with anything because I didn't grow up with them. So there's not.
I think that's for the best, because that means if you did write, Superman, just for example, you wouldn't be bringing that nostalgic attachment.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you say that.
A fresh set of eyes. It's
interesting you say that because this, and I'm going to be kind of vague here, but this line that I was writing for, that's what was kind of said. Like they were specifically looking for going after novelists that weren't comics people. Like they wanted fresh takes that weren't sort of steeped in the history and the lore, which I guess you could make arguments either way if that's good or not, but that is kind of what they were doing. So no, there's not like really one character. I think I have a great Batman take, but probably everyone thinks they're a great Batman take. I have a really awful horror Batman take, but I don't. I have not made it a priority to try to harangue whoever I would need to harangue to get that job. I'm overworked as it is, and honestly, it's like my tendency, and I think it comes from growing up with like Stephen King, maybe who wasn't somebody who really at that time anyway really wrote series and didn't really write sequels, and like I'm very, very much focused on kind of my own work and then moving on from it relatively quickly and not doing follow-ups. And so almost for that reason, it intrigues me because I haven't really done something that is an ongoing for years and years with a character. So yeah, now that I'm kind of talking myself into it now, like it's appealing because I haven't done it. So yeah, so we'll see.
Where do you currently sit on future novels? I mean, I don't know how many things you work on at a time or anything, but do you have anything percolating for later this year?
Yeah, I'm always working on several books at once, and then I won't bore you, but yeah, I'm always working at least 2 novels that I'm actually actively writing. But I'm very prolific. I'm too prolific, actually. I had 4 novels come out last year, and that had become almost the norm. Is like that's a lot. That's too much. And
you're gonna burn yourself out, man.
Well, it didn't feel like burnout, but what it felt like was I couldn't support the books. Like in this past year, I think I really felt for the first time that there were books that were coming out that I couldn't support. I was too busy with other things, books there's with any art, but there's always problems. Something comes out, you need to address certain things,
Sure.
publicity wise, and I couldn't do it. And books, I think projects of mine started falling through the cracks, and that was it felt sad that I was letting things die because I didn't have the time to deal with them. So I'm actually going to try to slow down.
Okay.
That said, I have just two novels out this year. I think 2.
That's still impressive. That's 2 more than most people.
Yes,
More than me.
that's what I'd like. I'd like to try to get to no more than 2 a year. And that's novels. Comics, I can feel like I can still do as many of those as I kind of want to. But yeah, I've got my favorite novel I think I've ever written coming out in August called Whale Fall. It's about a scuba diver that gets swallowed by a sperm whale and has 1 hour of air to get out of the whale.
Oh, wow.
And it was written with the close participation of a bunch of whale scientists. So it's 100% scientifically accurate. Exactly.
And the research for that is you spend an hour in a whale?
I've tried. I wanted to be present at a whale dissection. The only time you can ever really experience a whale is when they beach.
Sure.
And then scientists will come up from all over to study it because they've only got a few hours before the whale has to be taken back out to sea. And I wanted to try to get at one of those, but you have to get all these special sort of security clearances, like science clearances that I could never get. So I did everything else. I learned to scuba dive, blah, blah, blah. I did a bunch of other stuff. But alas, no whale for me.
No whale for you.
Probably be a little awkward when you're like, can I just crawl in for a few minutes?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I'm writing a book.
Usually it works.
Like candlelight. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for hanging out with us this past hour. It really has been a treat for us. Feel free to drop back by when the book when Trojan concludes. We can happily do a post game with you on it if you like. And yeah, man, just keep doing what you're doing. I'm always really impressed when we get to talk to somebody that's a real workhorse like yourself. That's not just doing one thing, but really multitasking and really has that creative spirit. And I just really appreciate you sharing that creativity with the world and your readers, man. I thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate people like you who are willing to read it, because I think it's the fear of people who aren't steeped in comics is that they don't have the qualifications for it, and they won't be accepted because of that. Like there's some secret code to it, some secret handshake that I didn't learn. So it's like, it's really nice to talk to people who are into comics and who are also appreciating what I'm doing. That makes me feel like I haven't squandered my chance, and then I can still
not at all. I mean, as a matter of fact, I think I'm gonna check out Autumnal here and do a little order on that. Check it out. So but thank you for that. Also, thank you for doing this and having me. Absolutely, man. The comic is called Trojan. It is on sale. Issue number 1, I should say, is on sale from AWA. You should absolutely go support your local comic shop now and ask them for it. Until next time.
Where can we find you on? Well, I was going to ask him where we could find him on social media.
Oh, good looking out, Chad.
DanielKraus.com is my website. The only social media I'm on is Twitter, and I'm on Twitter hiatus for the next couple months. But there you go.
There we go. I wonder why he's on Twitter hiatus. Sort of a dumpster fire thing. But hey, that's our show for the week. We'll be back next week with the one and only Mark Russell talking to us about Billionaire Island 2, Isle of Dogs, or Cult of Dogs, excuse me. Until next time, get out there, be good to each other, read something cool, and support your local comic book store. Thank you so much. I'm Matt. This is Chad, and our guest this week has been Daniel Kraus. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thanks, guys.